Is everybody online able to hear now?
Yep, you should be good.
Actually, I didn't get something to go by here. What we're gonna do, is that coming up here on the screen?
I think we can just. It's really the agenda and really just right here. We didn't develop an agenda,
Okay,
just the presentation and then time for questions.
well, Devin, I'll allow you to introduce your board,
All right. Thanks, Tim.
please.
All right, so we're here for our budget informational meeting for next year's FY24 Cisco Valley School District budget. Board members here on the screen, myself, Devin Batchelder, the chair, Don Collins here in the room is our vice chair. And then we have Toby McGuire, Terry O'Shea, Jen Chevalier, Joanne Johnston, Peter Magnet is here, and Stephen Scott. And Rennick Darrell Martin. So this that is your MVSD board of directors. And a quick overview of what the MVSD is, just how we begin each of these presentations. A reminder that this district covers the 3 elementary schools in Franklin, Highgate, and Swanton, as well as Cisco Valley Union Middle and High School. I see our enrollment number there at the bottom. What we're here to do tonight is talk about what's going to be on the ballot coming up on town meeting day next week. We'll see some articles for school directors and also this one for our budget. Shall the voters of the Cisco Valley School District approve the school directors to expend $44,983,567, which is the amount the school directors have determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. The note there at the bottom is just that this is the total expenditures. Taxes are based on our net education spending, which has our grant revenue incorporated. So we're going to dive into all that in a lot of detail later on. So just a quick note there, but the budget, the article on the ballot is to approve the total expenditure budget. Next, we have, outlining our budget priorities, and I'm gonna take a minute on this one because I think it's important that everyone has the background on how we arrived at these budget priorities. When we sit down as a board to think about budgets, we really are trying to support the vision of the school and reflect the priorities of the community. So at the beginning of this school year, we approved a vision statement, which is that the Cisco Valley School District supports students in finding success along the path they choose, supported by our portrait of a graduate. As the board set priorities for the current year, we really broke that down into four headers: safe and efficient and welcoming facilities, continuous improvement, personalized learning plans, and parental and community involvement. And part of that last one, the parental and community involvement, was to try to solicit input on our budget and our budget priorities earlier in the process. And so we had put out a survey back in early November, back in the fall, and got good responses from it. And what we learned from that was that the top priorities from our community were competitive pay and benefits to recruit and retain highly qualified employees is number one, making curriculum investments and instructional services to improve student academic outcomes, support for technical education, student apprenticeships and work readiness programs, and capital investments to improve and maintain safe and healthy school facilities. And so that the results really reaffirmed the other priorities the board had set for the year, those first four that I mentioned. And so as we go through the budget tonight, we're going to highlight where a lot of those things appear in this budget and how the budget is attempting to promote these priorities and really, like I said, get back to the first statement, supporting the mission and vision of the school and reflecting the priorities of the community. So that's the baseline here. So it comes from input from the community. That survey is direct result of community input during our last budget cycle on ways to improve this process. So we're open to more suggestions for sure on our budget process. Always trying to improve it. So that's all I have to say on that. So move along. All right, so this first one, talking about student outcomes and what we're working on, what we're trying to fund and invest in. If you've been attending any of our board meetings where we've been looking at a lot of data, student academic performance data, trying to make sure that that is front and center and that we're keeping track of how well we're doing as a school to serve our students. So we have a universal math and reading screeners that are in all our schools, and those are admin team is working to expand those to even more grades, getting up into the upper levels of the high school over the coming year. Responding a lot to some of the COVID impacts. We have additional interventionists and online intervention programs to help support students academically. And then for our staff, we've invested in professional learning and professional development in a variety of areas, math, writing, literacy, for instance. And then we know attendance is a major driver in our student academic success. So we've added a parent outreach coordinator and built up some of our tracking and reporting tools so that we can better respond and help kids be able to access school more frequently, more regularly. Some social skills screener and increased mental health guidance and behavioral support for students. Next one, I'll turn over to Peter for a few slides.
All right, as Devin said, our goal is to increase, student outcomes. And one of the main ways we saw doing that was having a high quality staff. So how are we going to retain and recruit a high quality staff? Because we know turnover does nothing but hurt our kids. So the board has made investments in increasing teacher salaries and wages, and also for the support staff. So we're no longer the lowest paying district in the region, which if you want to keep your staff, we've got to be competitive, and that's what we think we've done. We've retained most of our staff, filled teaching vacancies. So this fall, I think we were one of the only schools or districts in the region that had all our teaching vacancies filled or very close to it compared to the surrounding area. So again, I think what we're doing is working. So fully staffed, diversified agricultural program at MVU. That's something that we've recently been able to do. We've had a hard time with that. So I think this has helped us in that area as well. The board has made investments in additional staff benefits to be competitive, including life insurance and long-term disability offered by the district. Other optional benefits can be purchased by employees, such as vision, short-term disability, and additional life insurance. Professional learning opportunities, I think Devin touched on that, have been increased to help train and retain teachers and support staff. Looking at facilities, we want to make sure that we have healthy and well-run facilities that aren't falling apart around us. We need to invest in our buildings. One of the investments you can see here, the phase 2 of the MVU roof project. You can see the MVU roof from an aerial photo there, and you can see the black section there was the phase 1, which we did last year, and just to the right of that, on the very right, about the equal size of that one, that is in the budget to do in this coming fiscal year. So this is not a something that we looked at lightly. This is something that is a major need. Isn't something that is a good thing to have. We've got leaking roofs. We've got different sections with multiple leaks that our building administrators have to deal with whenever it rains or we've got thaw or melt. So it's a big issue. And this board has decided that the best way to deal with this is to do it in a piecemeal approach where we can put it in our budget each year and try to knock off a different pod every year until we can get the facility in a good roof on the whole facility. So that's our effort. We don't want to have to, we have to get it done, and we don't want to have to do a major bond for multi-millions of dollars to try to do it with all the extra cost that we would have to put that in. So that has been our strategy. Increased capital investments overall, including we've got a lighting project where we're going to upgrade all the lights in all of our schools, door security and camera systems in our schools. We're upgrading those. We're going to put a new upgrade and renovate science classroom at MVU. And also the Swanton school, we're going to be putting in a new floor replacement in the band room. So those are some of the projects, not all by any means, but some of the major projects that we're looking at. Major budget factors. I just went over the roof replacement, and I think Devin will be talking about actual cost in a few slides coming up. We've increased investments, as we talked, in staff and salary wages to retain high quality staff and reduce turnover. And this is going to help us improve student outcomes. Increased benefit cost, increased offerings to staff, 12% increase to health insurance premium, and 80-20 employer-employee split that is negotiated at state level. Inflation is obviously a big one. Everybody feels that. Our contracted services such as transportation and student support, major increases there. Transportation, everybody knows it's hard to get employees, hard to get drivers. The only way you can do that is to pay more money to get people. So obviously transportation, and that's just, I mean, fuel, everything. That's a major impact to our budget. And increased supply and material costs. Everything is increasing. It is obviously hitting us as well.
All right, so this tab is a little busy. This is the staffing budget broken down by school. We've had a request to see this level of information in the past, so we wanted to make sure this is available. I'm not going to dive into this in detail right now in this setting. You know, generally speaking, staffing is flat from year to year. You'll see just a slight increase in that total by 6 FTEs, so about 1.5%. Most of that coming from support staff. So I'm just going to leave this there. We can handle this in the question session later on if we need to, but just really pointing out that, and we'll get into it some more here in the next few slides. A lot of the increases are not coming from growth in staff; they're coming from those other sources that Peter had just highlighted. So what's in the budget? It's, you know, this is a large budget. It's difficult to dive into real line item detail. So this is that slightly summarized, but a little more detailed look at what's in this budget. It's primarily salaries and benefits. It's about 75% salaries and benefits. See that chart's maybe a little easier to read here in a couple of slides. But I'll give everyone just a moment to digest this list of values. So the growth here from one budget year to the next is $4.2 million. So
Just may want to mention the transportation on there.
Yeah, so transportation sort of has an outsized level of growth there relative to its total cost. You know, this has to do with the spike in gas prices that occurred over the last summer. And then the busing companies are also dealing with staffing issues and having to provide large increases to their bus drivers to fill those positions. That's another area where vacancy rates are very high in Vermont and around the country. That's kind of a problem spot. So locally, higher wages have been the answer to that. That gets passed along to those of us utilizing those services. All right, Julie. Okay, so here's that same information, just broken down in a chart. This is where you can see salaries and benefits really are the substantial costs here, about 74% there. But really contracted and other purchase services. We have those in place of salaries is really how that works. Those are our caseworkers and other, you know, there's a variety of things that fall into that, but it's mostly personnel as well. So again, that's a substantial piece of the school budget. And here's the breakdown of the increases. So this is the $4.2 million variance, the increase from our current year school budget to the proposed budget for next year. 30% of that, 31% of that is salaries, and that's not coming from growth in FTEs, number of employees. It's coming from those wage changes, the wage rate changes. So this was that strategy Peter talked about. There were negotiated increases for professional staff as well as for our support staff. That has helped us keep our vacancy rates low, which is highly beneficial to our students in the long run, the short and the long run. So that's that piece of it. The next largest piece is the addition of the MVU roof project, $1.1 million. So that's a quarter of the increase that we are proposing. Transportation is next on that list. Health and dental, really, it's not negotiated by us, but it's increased in staffing costs to have those higher benefits. The state now negotiates all teacher health benefits, and so that just gets passed along to each school district. Unfortunately, it's not something we have direct control over, but we do have to absorb those costs associated with the teachers in our district. And then we have those couple of more minor items there. Taxes and benefits, again, associated with wage increases, and then the inflation items is, you know, in that contract and other services section. All right, so now we get into some of the tax math. So as a starter here, this is that high level number. You see our expenditure budget, the 44.9 million that is going to appear on the ballot. Education spending, that next row, that is after our expenses are offset by grant revenue and other federal state funding that we receive. So the net education spending is the 33.9, roughly $34 million. That third row, that estimated spending per equalized pupil, it's part of our tax math. It's also a really useful way for us to compare our district spending with the spending of the other districts throughout the state of Vermont. So that's something we use to benchmark ourselves to make sure that we are, you know, we're always trying to strike a balance of being fiscally responsible and making sure that our kids have what they need. And so, so we'll go to the next one and see where we have landed. This is us compared with the expected state average spending. So we'll still be, this proposed budget puts us $1,000 below the state average for next year. So it's not a terrible place to be. I bet if we polled the board members, we'd get a mix of who wants to be a little closer to the state average, who's comfortable, who's wanting a little come out. So probably means we've hit the right balance. This board, I guess, supported this budget, so I'd say we have hit the right balance in our opinion. But that's a good note to note, is that we do continue to be below the state average in our spending for equalized people. All right, and now the details of the tax map. I think I'm debating here to start with the final answer or go through this. I think it's useful to just start with the final answer so you guys know where all this is headed and that it's clear. When we get to the end of all this, we're gonna see property taxes going up in Franklin and Highgate by about 8.5%. And in Swanton by about 6%. And we'll see that the vast majority of that is because of the change in our property values and not as a result of the equalized tax rate, which comes from the school budget math on this sheet. So the way it works is they take our net education spending, the 33.9 million, it's divided by our number of equalized pupils. The state again has math on how they calculate that. And it comes to our spending per equalized pupil. There's a yield is provided to us by the state every year. And our 19,000 is divided by that $15,000 yield to give us our equalized homestead tax rate. And so this is the rate applied to the taxable value of our homes. And I'll emphasize taxable value is different than appraised value. And that's where we see those differences by town that I referenced. So we'll pop to the next one slide here to look at how we've compared from year to year. When we talk about the effect of the school budget and the equalized tax rate, we've come down since 2019, 2020. And next year's proposal brings us just barely higher than where we sit right now. It's more or less flat. It's about a 0.25% increase. But as I noted, we do expect property taxes to go up fairly substantially, but it's not as a result of this number, which is flat from year to year. And again, we're highlighting the differences by town, because the next step in this, we start with that education tax rate, and we have to apply the common level of appraisal. And so this is where the state tries to estimate, well, they come up with a taxable value of our property, different than the appraised value, the listed value. And so to grab the first column of an example, in Franklin, when they tell us the common level of appraisal is 83.76%, they're telling us that the listed value with the town is 83.7% of the taxable value. So our taxable value is higher than the listed value that the town gives us on our tax bill. And so our total tax is the equalized tax rate times our taxable value. And now they can't change the listed value for our homes with the town, so they adjust our estimated tax rate instead. And that's where we end up with those different values for our adjusted tax rate. So the towns each have a different common level of appraisal. The state looks at sales of properties in each town, compares them to the listed values in those towns, and comes up with these values to estimate what the taxable value is compared to our listed value. So obviously we're not reappraised every year, but the state wants to adjust the taxable value every year, trying to tax us at the market value of our homes rather than the listed value. So that's what generates those different rates per town. I hope to explain that a little more clearly on the next slide. So here's the example. We always like to in the past, we've always said, what are the taxes on a $200,000 home? And so that's what we've presented here. And so we're looking at a home with a taxable value of $200,000. And so the equalized tax rate, as we saw, was the 1.2371, gives us that 2474 as a total tax. So what would that look like if that $200,000 home were located in each of our 3 towns? So because that common level of appraisal is different, what it means is that even though this home has a $200,000 taxable value, that's what the state says it's worth and what's gonna be taxed at, it's gonna have a different listed value in each of the towns. So you'd expect to see in Franklin that home was listed at 167,000, in Highgate at 170,000. And then Swanton at 179,000. So I'm on row C there. But the total tax, regardless of where it's located, is that $2,474. And so because we have different listed values for the same taxable value, the only way to get to that $2,474 total tax is to have slightly different tax rates in those towns. So if you were to, in Franklin again, multiply 1.477 by the $167,520 appraised value, you'll land at that same 2474 per tax. So what I'm really trying to emphasize on this is that our 3 towns are taxed the same. I know this has been a point of discussion and I think misunderstanding in the past, because we see those town-specific tax rates, right? But the only reason they're different is because they're trying to adjust for the fact that a home with equal taxable value has a different listed value in the 3 towns. But we are all taxed at the same equalized tax rate, given the same taxable value on the homes. So that's my point on all of that. The next piece here is to kind of, I know this one's busy. Break down the impact of, it's mentioned taxes are going to go up in our 3 towns. So this is kind of breaking that down and what it looks like. So starting with that $200,000 home last year, and so your last tax bill that was paid in the fall, town by town there. Sorry, I keep grabbing Franklin just because it's the first column and it's grabbing my attention. So in Franklin, you can see using the common level appraisal from a year ago and the total tax and equalized tax rate, that home would have been appraised at $181,420. So a home appraised at $181,420 last year had a taxable value of $200,000. That common level of appraisal changes every year, like I said, because the state's trying to tax us at the market value and not the listed value. So in the 2022 box at the top, the common level of appraisal was 0.9. In 2023, it went down to 0.8376. And so that means that the property value has gone up. And so that home that was taxed at $200,000 in 2022 is going to be taxed at $216,595 in 2023. And so that is a direct result of the state determining, based on the survey data they had, that the property values have gone up by that much. When the equalized tax rate is applied to that, we see a total tax of $2,679, and that's an increase from 22 to 23 of $211.70. So that's the 8.5% increase for the expected for the town of Franklin. Highgate, you see 207.40 as the total increase. That's also about 8.5%, and then Swanton 147.60 is about 6%. The next 2 rows there are the breakdown. About $6 is coming from the change in the equalized tax rate from the school budget. The remainder is coming from the change in our property values. And so this is the result of inflation. The last 2 years, the real estate market was great for sellers, and this is the impact of it. And so, while it's great to see the values of our property go up in many cases, when it comes to paying our taxes, it is a negative. And so that's what we're seeing here and what we're dealing with in this next year. All right. So that's where I'll pause.
So if we look at the polling places and times for town meeting, which is next Tuesday, March 7th. In Franklin, it's going to be at the town hall from 7 AM to 7 PM. Franklin will be having their regular town meeting in person starting at 10 AM. So the polling will be before and after that, as well as during. Highgate, I believe, is doing the same thing. They're going to be voting at the Highgate Elementary School and Highgate Center. And again, that is from 7 AM to 7 PM. And then in Swanton, it will be at the Swanton Village Municipal Complex. Also, all three towns will be from 7 AM to 7 PM. And Swanton will also be voting on all of their town budget items as well.
All right, I appreciate everyone sitting through and listening to that. We're ready to take questions. I'll turn back over to Tim, our moderator.
Any questions?
Yeah, so on your roofing project. If you guys
Wait a
want-
minute, Bernie, can I ask this question for people to ask questions? Please stand up and state your name, please.
Yeah, Bernie Gladden, I live in Highgate. I don't have any kids in school, but. Thank God. But anyway, so on your roofing project, so you've done one of the pods. Now you've identified the second one. So what do you use for criteria to decide who gets done when and all that?
Want to go back to that slide?
You're gonna handle that question?
I'm gonna turn that one over to Peter, who's the chair of our facilities committee.
And I will reshare that presentation and come up to that picture of the roof.
All right.
Oops.
Oop, you have it there. So Bernie, you can see the one that got done there.
Yeah.
So the real problem area, the major problem is and I don't remember all the pod letters. but
Right here.
yeah, that middle area is the problem area where most of the leaks are. And we're being told that they can't work on that roof until the 3 outer ones are done before they can go to that one. And so, and they all have issues, they all need to be done, but we need to get to that one in the center. So the cost of this project, Laura, do you know what the cost is overall for all three? Or for all the, oh, there we go.
Before inflation. Yeah. 3 years from now, when we're trying to move on Boston.
So the one we're looking at right now is 1.1 million, and then the next larger one on the outside
This
there.
one, yeah.
We've got an estimate of 1.6 million, and that finally gets us to the pod in the middle, which is another 1.1 million. So we're trying to do this reasonably for the taxpayers without having to try to do this all at once and have to borrow the money and pay the extra costs and interest. We're trying to methodically get through it. So, but time is of the essence. We can't keep kicking it down the road because, like I said, that center part is the worst part, and we're trying to get to a point where we can get to that.
So what kind of roof is that? Membrane roof, some type of?
It is, I don't have
It
all,
will be now. The previous roof was not, and it was a foam that breaks down, so it had to be replaced every 10 years, and there's nobody who can actually do it anymore within Vermont.
Nobody wants to.
Yes, so it wasn't an efficient roof to begin with, so it's more expensive, I mean, it's big area as well. But with this membrane roof, it will be easier in the future for maintenance,
Like isolation and all that.
all of it.
so, and we're kind of, this is the hand we're dealt, right? And, we've looked at, what would it take to replace it, like a new school? And you've seen what's going on in Burlington. And
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can't take care of your roofs, the rest of your living really doesn't matter.
exactly, right, so that's why we've made it a priority and and at the same time, still trying to do it in a reasonable way.
So why did they say they couldn't do the center hub until they did the others? Just out of curiosity.
I,
The way they interact
yeah,
and connect.
they would have to tear apart some of the stuff they've already done. If they, you know what I mean, if they do that, try to do that section.
So if they do the center first, they have to destroy some of that. to do the others.
Right,
The center is actually lower,
yeah,
so they will have to pull the edge of the top room off and then put the other one under, but there's a process for that. But it's significantly, I've been up there actually, and it's like 3 feet lower, it's significant.
Yeah. So are your air handling systems up there as well?
Yes, which is the other problem, there's 112 units that come up through the roof. But to replace those is another.
So who's doing the roofing? You don't mind asking?
Yeah, can't remember the company that's gonna do phase 2 though. We're working with Energy Efficiency Investments, which is a performance contractor, and they're managing the bid process. And it changed for the second.
not the same.
I could probably find an email in the next couple of minutes. The person they're awarding the second round to is someone else. Green Mountain, sounds seems the green thing.
So, I think one thing is, he doesn't ask, but one thing I think we need to stress to the voters. That in this budget, there's over $1 million increase. But that will not increase, say, the following year. Inflation may increase a little bit, but this is the first time, even though it's the second that it's been in the budget. We were able to last year through some monies that we had available do the first one. So next year, you won't see that $1 million jump in budget request. It may not be flat, but it should be pretty close to flat. And I've had people already ask me, wow, $1 million this year, $1 million next year, $1 million next year. No, it will go up some, but this is the big hurdle right here.
That's right, thanks, Doc.
All right. Any other? Of course, I've got other questions. So your professional development and all that sort of stuff. How many of your teachers and staff and all that participate in professional development? How do you identify who needs what?
I'll give that one to Julie, that's a good operational question.
So we have 2 kinds of professional development, the kind that teachers are contractually allowed, they're allowed to have a 3-credit course every year of their own choosing. So that's one kind. And then the other, we use a lot of ESSER money for this as well, and the grant funding. But we do a needs assessment looking at our data, and we have teams of coaches and teacher leaders and building administrators and the curriculum director, and they determine what the next piece of professional development is needed across the district. So you will continuously see us up train teachers in math, English language arts, early literacy, writing, and we use particular evidence-based, approaches and bring in different professionals, make sure all the schools get the same PD. So we have different kinds. There's the kinds that we do during in-service, or some that come in on and observe teachers and then meet with them after school. So we have a variety of approaches, but we really make sure that if we're, for instance, we're implementing a new math program, we make sure that all teachers get that professional development.
So on your slides, I thought I did see something about math program.
Absolutely.
Just kind of explain that.
Oh, sure. We, oh, is that all right?
Yes.
We had to do a needs assessment, as I described, particularly when we were looking at recovery from the pandemic. And one of the areas we determined in our recovery planning was the need to look at new materials. It's not a curriculum. The curriculum is the same, what standards we're assessing, but what materials teachers are using, what textbooks. Mostly people don't use textbooks, we have online programs now. But the scope and sequence and how the instructional units are delivered. And so we had a team of math experts in our district take a year to study. We used the Vermont Math Initiative leadership came in and helped them through that process. So we didn't just go shopping. MVU actually decided that they were going to jump right in this year. They weren't even going to pilot. And the math teachers got professional learning, and they've been working on this new program and delivering new instructional units this year. And in the elementary schools, they've been piloting and they're jumping right in next year. So pretty much anytime we make a change like that, now we're looking at early literacy materials next. And we'll do a similar process.
So how do we measure how effective we are at whatever it is?
Oh, absolutely. We use a
I'm not
national.
trying to give you guys a hard time. I just
Oh,
want-
no.
Just for my own information. I figured so, right?
I'll say I appreciate this question. It's the stuff we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And frankly, not a lot of people come to all our meetings, so this forum where we have a few more, I'm thrilled to be able to talk
I've
about
let
it.
them do all.
Okay.
I just haven't been-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, can I say something?
Absolutely.
This is not the way we're supposed to be running this meeting.
Sorry.
You're supposed to be talking to me,
Sorry.
Bernie, but I'm gonna let it flow. Because you are asking good questions in a calm way. But if we do get, and I've got to ask one question. After this, Bernie, do we have anybody online with their hand up?
Yeah.
So we've got to if you don't mind, Bernie.
If somebody else wants the floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I want to come back to you, but we've got to give everybody a chance here, so can we come back to you in a few minutes and we'll allow this, I'll allow you to answer the last question.
And then,
And then
I'm cut off.
we're gonna head on to somebody else, so, yeah, if I can get your attention, Derek, and keep me posted what's going on there, please, thank you, yes, go ahead.
thank you for the reminder, Tim. I like to talk about these things, so I'm happy to answer. We have also invested, one of the slides talks about it, in assessments that are done 3 times a year. They're nationally normed, so we're not making the tests up ourselves in reading and in mathematics. And we're expanding that up through high school. We've been focused K through 9, but we're expanding that even into higher grades. So we look at, and we can look at how well kids are doing in all of math in 4th grade, but then the teachers obviously can get right down into the levels. So they can then change their instruction, make those decisions as they go along. And they meet in personal, rather professional learning communities every week to do that by subject.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
It looks like Randall Rupp.
Okay, Randall, if we state your name and then ask your question, please.
Yeah, thanks. Randy Root, please, thank you. I'm in West Swanton. I had actually I had a follow-up question to the previous one. When are the assessments that you get from the improvements in faculty in their specific learning or whatever courses they're taking, are those assessments driving the school rating to a higher level? I'm looking at the 2021 school ratings, and the MVU is like 38 out of 46. Is there any thought of getting that above, to go up the ladder here and get a higher rating?
Sure.
And how do you assess that?
Yeah, Randy, thanks. I'm gonna start answering that from the board perspective, and I'm gonna turn it over to Julie to talk about the specifics of the assessment. One of the primary goals of the board is to increase student proficiency for precisely the reason that you've highlighted. MVU historically has not fared well comparatively. And so that's an emphasis of this board. We've asked the admin team to focus on that, to present us with real results. Acknowledging that it's going to be a journey. It's not something that can happen overnight, but it also has to happen. And so that's the process and the path we're on as a board. I'll turn that over to Julie to talk about how that's currently happening.
Well, and Randy, to answer your question, I was going to just see if I could quickly pull up, because I have recently looked at what goes into those assessments. The assessments we use to drive instruction are not anything that is published in one of those best school reports, right? Those go by the state assessments that are mandated by the federal government. They also look at things like graduation rates, where we're strong. They look at a variety of things. They may look at students who take the SATs and things like that, that we don't actually get our hands on that data. What we use our local assessments for, they're very much tied, trying not to use the word psychometric, but there it is. They're very much tied to what the state assessments are. So if I'm seeing my third grade is progressing well on these local assessments, it's a good indicator that they'll do well on the state assessment. So those are mostly tied to what has been SBAC scores. Those scores have been frozen for quite a while, and they're getting rid of that assessment, replacing it with another one. It feels like every 7 years now, they change our state assessment. But yes, that is something that, for me as a school leader, my eye is on our schools doing better, our students doing better, and measurable progress, and not so much those outside indicators. But I know a lot of community members look at that, and it is disheartening when you look at it and you say, oh, there we are. We are better. I do want to point that out. We have risen better.
Yeah, Julie, could I just ask
Your name.
Becky Roop, could I ask a follow-up question? You know, according to the Vermont Digger stats, for example, MVU has a proficiency based on a mush of standardized tests of 23%, which is, so is there any effort among your group to visit other high schools around the state who are performing better to see if there's some comparison there? I mean, what are they doing that isn't being done at MVU? I think that's the end of my question.
Is that, you want Julie to answer that one, Devin?
So Dawn, I think, had a response to Randy.
Go finish this.
You okay? Okay, and then in that case, I'll go to Julie. Yeah.
So I would say in many ways, yes. Student performance has to do, it's very complex about a system, right? So if you're comparing a community where 80% of families are college graduates with, you know, a high interest in school performance, and other communities have 10, 11, 13% of community members in that same place, you have a different demographic, basically. But when it comes to things like instructional practice, programs that we use, teaching methodology, because MVU has always been in this place since they started really measuring progress, we are actually quite ahead in terms of making sure that we're using as good practice as we can, that we're using evidence-based programming. This math program is a great example. In implementing it, teachers were saying things like, yeah, but I don't want to do this part. I want to go back and review this other part. And we're saying, no, you have to do it with fidelity so we can really be sure that kids are getting a viable instructional program, that they're getting all of it. We're not focusing on one part when we need to do it all. So our curriculum directors in the state and in the region collaborate. Our principals do so, our superintendents do. There's a great deal of regional collaboration and discussion of what it looks like in Essex, what it looks like in other schools. So we're very aware of that. Having high quality teachers that we keep, you know, if you have to hire a new math teacher every year for 9th grade, you're never having a master teacher in front of your 9th graders. It takes about 5 years for that teacher to get to that level. And if they're going to another district where they can make $10,000 more a year, they do. And so we're trying to stem that. We really believe that that's going to make a big difference. Training our teachers, of course, but also holding on to them. Because it feels like we've been training them for CVU for a while.
Okay,
Don, you had.
I want to go back to Randy, just my follow-up, Randy. I'm not saying we're proud of it. I think we're proud of the growth. We're not proud of where we are. I don't know if you were living in Swanton a decade ago, but the state of Vermont came in and took school because of just the way things were going, and we're not getting the student achievement. The rest of the board members hear this about every other meeting. We, like other schools throughout the country, have an truancy issue. And when students don't come to school, then they don't learn. And I think is this the first year, Julie, we've had the position?
It's the second year, but it is in the budget.
But we really need to work with parents on expectations, family expectations, and getting children to school. Because this is throughout the grades. It's not just high school students. It's in middle school, it's in the elementary school. Some students just don't show up. And when you take away vacations, which we aren't criticizing, and illness, and then just in some cases where the family situation doesn't make it a requirement, maybe it's unrealistic on my part, but to get the children to school. So we are making progress. I think we do have a good plan, and I think the merger in some ways helped. But there are so many variables, and some of them we have a hard time controlling attendance. So, you know, if you own the business and your employees will miss 20% a year, your production would be down. And that's what we deal with. It's not an excuse, it's something working.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Could I ask one more question? Actually, it's a comment. I would be totally in favor of increasing the teachers' salaries. That $1,000 less per equalized pupil that you showed, I would increase that if I had to. If there was a way, a surefire way of showing success. And so is there just a comment? I wonder if it's possible to go through the entire budget next year and carve out some money from different programs to put into teachers' salaries. Teachers aren't paid enough.
Thank you. Bernie, you had more questions, I
Actually, he
understand.
asked my almost exact question word for word.
Okay, okay. Do we have any other questions? Because I understand online we have none.
I haven't seen a hand raised.
You have a question? State your name.
Jim Sullivan from Highgate. I'm just looking through here and I'm just wondering what the budget for the ag department is. I don't see a specific spot for ag to their budget. Is there one spot here to see that? Or is it broke down in salaries and different things? Because the ag actually does their own budget, so I don't think you would see, you know, ag, you would see a budget for the ag.
To Laura.
Sure, so the ag or a budget including agriculture is included in the department budget. So similarly to us receiving a science budget or a math budget or a social studies budget or a health budget, we receive a natural resources, ag and natural resources budget as well. And that goes, so it's developed by that team, and then it goes to administration for approval, and then it's incorporated into the instructional lines that you'll see in the top part of the budget. But it's not broken out.
You're
It's not
gonna see
broken
a
out in that quote.
specific ag budget or science budget or math, they're all broke down.
They're all under instruction, like the other budgets. I will say that there's also been a shift. We're trying to identify all the facility resources in one place in the interest of transparency and just to follow the uniform chart of accounts. So things like lumber or changes to the facility itself would actually go to a facility budget, like it would if we needed to fix the science classroom. That would go to the facility budget. It would be the same thing for the ag portion or the natural resources or the welding or mechanics or woods. Those would all be under that. Those portions would be under plant.
Yeah, I just know that from my listening to different things that there are different grants, and besides salary, I mean, a lot of stuff in the ag is paid with grants and either donations or stuff, so it's hard to, you know, to figure out how much money is spent. I think a lot of it just salary and different smaller issues, because there are grants and a lot of donations, say for feed or animals or such, that are donated to the project, so it's not the cost outright. So yeah, I just wanted to know, because we even get, money from the state per student. So there's that amount, so I mean, there is quite a bit that goes into the ag that isn't coming out of our pockets, and I think a lot of people, should realize that the ag is not a big expenditure, just Amy's salary. And I just want to say I'm happy with our 3 new teachers. I'm glad we stepped up and did that, and I hope that we can keep them into the following year. I don't, just because there have been some issues, and hopefully we can work them out. But thank you.
Thank you for your question. Is there anybody else online? Nobody has any questions? Kevin, anything you want to, or Don?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. May I address the gentleman, Mr. Anderson's question?
Yes.
So the state has become much more involved in how schools budget, keep track of their expenses, and report for the last decade. One of the issues of the ag program, and I think it's a positive in some ways, but if you're an old timer like me, you've been around 50, 60 years, you remember somebody gave you a pool of money and they didn't ask any questions, they hope the heck you didn't spend over it. Okay, those days are gone. And so it's hard sometimes sitting around the table and seeing the change and saying, when it goes into a budget, like say equipment, it's all equipment. If it's supplies, and I think when that happens, it may be confusing to the taxpayers, but I think more than that, it kind of creates a little anxiety amongst the staff. I put in so much, I got approval, and now I'm finding the guy down in the science department, or history department. He's just said he got a little bit more money that wasn't budgeted, so I think we have to trust people, feel that they're doing right. I think I've been working with Jim Macy for over 30 years, first as a consultant here to the school, and I respect him. But I think Jim, like myself, sometimes wish we were back where they hand you a bag of gold and say, we trust this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. We developed any questions online? You guys, no more questions?
No more questions. I'll just close again by thanking everyone for attending tonight. Reminding everyone that the vote is next Tuesday, March 7th. At your local polling place, Franklin, Highgate, or Swanton. If you have comments or questions, feel free to reach out to any board members. We hope that you'll all show up to vote and tell your friends and support our schools. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.
Hey,
Tim,
Can I throw something in there?
Yeah, real quick, Yvonne, I'll allow it.
Hey, look, I'm just thinking about everything that everyone has said and whatnot. Bernie's hit a lot of questions here that I had here tonight and whatnot. The ag department's come up, and that's something that I feel is like unclear. There's a lot that's like not being shared or said, or it's not talked about a whole lot. And I feel that the ag department is one very important piece of MVU. Myself, I mean, I was in the FFA for at least 4 years when I was at Missisquoi, and it's like, I feel that it's dying away. Maybe it'll come back with time, and I feel that it's unclear, and it's, there's not much being talked about it. So I don't know if there's a lack of advertising for it to spruce it up. I guess I don't have a specific question about it. I just don't want to see it die out. Franklin County is a huge county for dairy, and it's not just dairy anymore. It's a lot of small things that are around dairy. It's forestry. It's a lot of things, and I have a lot of positive memories when I was in Missisquoi, when I was in the FFA. I would just hate to see it die out.
You know, if Yvonne saw the.
Yeah, can we, so, Yvonne, we had some students here, in one of our meetings not so long ago, January. Students from MVU who attended the national FFA conference, representing Vermont and Missisquoi. They came and shared their experience, and it was fantastic. We hope that will grow, and so they revived the program. I guess it had been on hiatus for
And
quite some time, and so it's happening again, even if it's small right now.
we have a teacher spearheading it, which is really the big difference. Seems to be
Okay, we have-
really devoted to it, so.
We have a question back there.
Just, not a question, just a touch. On the FFA, for the first time in 4 to 5 years, we actually have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer of the FFA. We had students step up and take those positions, and it's been the first time in like 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So the FFA, one of our new teachers is spearheading that, Elizabeth Sweet. And she's taken three students to the FFA convention. Her and Joe DePatie took it down. And they had a good time and a lot of stuff. So there are things happening with the FFA, and it is up and coming. So just to make you feel a little better about that. There was talk, if you want to start, they want to try and get an FFA alumni going. So if that's something that maybe you would be interested in helping out, that we can get some alumni to come and talk with our students.
Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any more comments or questions?
Yeah, I have one comment, Tim.
Yes, Bernie.
Seen a little bit of stuff, mostly online and some commentary from different areas. That there is some more push to change school names. And Missisquoi was on that list,
Mhm.
and it's my fervent hope that this board would oppose that entirely.
Thank you, Bernie.
I will
Any other
second that.
comments? Any other comments or questions? If not, can we move to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, correct, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Yvonne and tell him to look at the January 3rd MVSD board meeting. It's online on the MVSD website, and you will see the presentation from the FFA students, and you really enjoyed it. It was a great presentation. So I just wanted to tell him that.
Thank you, Pierrette.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Marilyn's trying to say something there, I believe. You gotta unmute yourself, Marilyn.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Marilyn.
Okay. I wondered if you have a truancy officer.
We do. I mean, we're required to name somebody, but we have a student engagement and attendance professional. She's like a homeschool coordinator who focuses on attendance, and she works with families to get students to come. And when we do have to move for an affidavit and go to court over truancy, she coordinates that with the leaders. Yeah, unfortunately, it does get to that sometimes.
Thank you.
I have one more question, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I had a lot of trouble getting in via Zoom, but so you may have already addressed this. But I got this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, explaining this meeting. And one of the things I saw on it that you may have already dealt with was a general, I think it was a 24% that can be generally attributed to inflation. Did somebody explain what that means?
Yeah, so we had a more detailed slide. That was obviously a real high level summary. We had a detailed slide going over the increases. The biggest item in that was increase in transportation costs, which we received from both our busing companies as well as some other private transportation that we have to use. Whether it's homeless transportation or transportation to other offsite settings. So that's probably the biggest item in there. A lot of it then is just general increases from a lot of our contract services. We use NCSS for a lot of that's Northwestern Counseling and Support Services for a lot of student support. They're clinicians and social workers, and so there have been wage increases throughout the region, and a lot of that gets passed along through those contracts. So those are kind of the big pieces in there.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just want to say thank you to all the board members, Tim. Their time and effort is appreciated.
Thank you, Yvonne. Any other questions or comments, board? Okay, we'll try.
Try again.
You have something you want to say?
No.
We'll try again to adjourn. And I will look up.
Still good.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? We've adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.